But I can't do it, you say. I wag a finger at you and say, au contraire, my friend. You can, and I'm going to help you understand how. Starting with this episode of Horrible Writing.
That will never work. You can't push us. Seriously?
Don't.
Oh my God, that's other things you can do. That's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn to stop? Be happy. While you're don't bother. I've seen better things. Do you really want to shoot? And my third grade, give it up.
Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. Hey everyone, Paul Sading, your host of Horrible Writing, episode 46. Happy July. Well, if you are hearing this episode, that means that I survived a trip to Europe and back. And I'm coming back with a whole new perspective on the world. And I want to thank all of those wonderful people that I met in England and Germany. And I want to go back again soon. I want to do tons of research so I can finally start writing that epic fantasy that I have in the back of my brain. So it's good to be back. And hopefully you all have had a good past half month or so since the last time we talked. When I was on my way off to get ready to go to Europe, I did this standalone episode and sort of introduced the idea to all of you writers to think about using podcasting as a platform to grow your audience, to help you be discovered. And I left you asking you to think about the doubting voice, that overly skeptic part of your brain that's probably driven by fear, and to try to really silence it so that you can actually be analytical and think about, hey, could this really be something I can do? Fast forward these couple of weeks, and hopefully you've done that. If you haven't, maybe you're from the future and you're binging through these episodes as you go. Maybe you haven't put a lot of thought to it. Hopefully I've kept your attention long enough that you're not just skipping past this episode to go to the next episode to, get content that you want, because I truly, truly believe in this, or I wouldn't be doing episodes on it. I would not dedicate episodes to this if I didn't feel it. You notice early on in this show's history, I didn't talk about this stuff. I would slip in notes about podcasting or my podcasts in episodes about writing, but I haven't dedicated an episode to it until we started with episode 44. And the reason is now, having released Chasing the Demon to a relatively strong release, I saw firsthand, and firsthand experiences all I've got to go on, because the simple fact is that we're only a little over a month into that book being out there. So I don't have data sets that I feel comfortable making conclusions on, especially with one book from somebody who is unknown. I'm an unknown author. There are authors, there are audio dramatists, never the twain shall meet. Well, we're meeting. There are a couple of us crossing over, but it's still relatively unexplored, which is why I'm talking to you about this topic. In that 44th episode, I mentioned when I'm talking about this, I'm talking to all writers. So poets, audio dramatists, screenwriters, fiction, nonfiction, authors. I truly believe that this platform can be something you can leverage to grow an audience for yourself. I honestly, truly believe that. And I wanted to start diving into these things quickly. Try to give you as much as I can, as fast as I can. So we got to start right at the beginning. I don't know anything about podcasting. Well, nobody does when they start podcasting. And that's why I feel it's imperative for, especially to those of you who are entertaining the idea, maybe it's teasing you a little bit, to really invest. Instead of maybe going brain dead for an hour and a half watching a movie, maybe dedicate one of those movie nights, sacrifice it to read up on how to podcast, because this is a great time to be in this game. It's a great time to experiment with this bleed of mediums. It works. Look at Joanna Penn. Great success story. Her and her husband make their living off of her writing. And her podcast had a lot to do with that. She's been around for a long time, and that's great. And there are a lot of writers who have writing podcasts who are also authors. So some of you are saying, hey, Paul, really isn't that new. You haven't stumbled on anything. I'm not saying I have. But what I offer to you to think about is there are a lot of writers, authors, who have podcasts. They're bleeding over. They're complementing each other. But how many of those writers, how many of those poets have podcasts that are not about writing? I've got 5 podcasts. See, 5 podcasts now, and another 5 or 6 that are dormant. Atheist Apocalypse being the most recent one to be put in the box, up on a shelf, so I can move on and do other things. This is the only podcast I have that's about writing. Those other 10 were not about writing. So I'm growing an audience. I'm growing a brand. People are getting to know me on a creative, in a creative respect, and as much as I share in a personal respect, which is part of my brand. It helps grow an audience. If I went back to all of my podcasts for the last 7 years, I've already broke 1 million downloads. That's nothing to sneeze at. It's not the best. There are some people who have networks behind them and television money, and, they get 1 million downloads in the first week of their first episode of their first ever podcast. But the rest of us have to slug it out and just fighting day in and day out. And 1 million downloads, all told, is not something to sneeze at. And more than half of that is made up from my fiction podcasts. Did you know that this episode of Horrible Writing is brought to you by my first novel, called Chasing the Demon, which you can find on Amazon now? It's a thriller adapted from the first season of my Subject Found audio drama. It follows Jared Strong, a man who is haunted by a memory from his childhood that drives his passions as an adult, drives him into the forests of the Pacific Northwest to chase a demon that's been haunting him since his youth. He has given up a lot in this struggle, and he might have to give up more. If you're enjoying this show, if you enjoy thrillers, if you like stories that are just fun to adventure along with, pick up a copy of Chasing the Demon today, or tell a friend to pick up a copy, or both of you pick up a copy. If you do, I want to thank you in advance. And of course, as always, I want to thank you for your listens. So that's what I offer to you in this second iteration of this Getting Discovered mini-series, if you will, is to ask you to think about that. Ask you to think about what could you do in a podcast form that would help your writing. Whether it's a book of poetry, like I said, a screenplay that you've got a novel that's in draft form. But think about those things, because there are a ton of writers who are putting out books and putting out podcasts. But how many writers are putting out books, but doing podcasts about things that are not about writing. Carving out that niche. Nonfiction writers, your ears should have perked up by now. Memoir writers, fiction writers, audio drama is this is a great time to get into it. It's starting to become saturated. The longer you wait, the harder it is going to be for you to be discovered. Sometimes I don't believe in luck. Okay. I believe in people just busting their ass and standing back up every single time they get knocked down. Now, some people are fortunate. They have the right content, the right personality at the right time, and things work for them on the first try. But that's the exception. The rest of us try something, it sucks, it blows up in our face. We get back up after we're done pouting, and we go do something, try something again, or try the same thing in a different way. And that's what I want to ask you to do in this episode, is to put those doubts away, because podcasts are growing year after year after year. There's new platforms coming in all the time. You can get on your Alexa at home and play a podcast. You can do it on your phone. This is a great medium that is saturated, but it's not nearly what blogs are. It's not nearly what the book market is. And you get to be the master. You decide if you choose to accept this assignment. You just get to decide what your podcast would look like, what it would be, what the obligations of it would be to you, so that you don't detract from your writing time. But I can't encourage this enough. This is a medium that isn't nearly as intimidating or difficult as a lot of people who don't do it think it is. You can do it very simply, very easily. You can also make it very complex. But again, all of that's within your control. And would you really, from a marketing perspective, from an awareness perspective, would you really be willing to exclude this as a mechanism to be discovered, to grow an audience? You can throw writing out there on the internet, on Inkshares or Reddit or whatever, and you might get lucky. Are those people a paying audience, a book buying audience? So with this episode, I want you to think about that. I want you to commit to at least entertaining the idea that you could do your own podcast. And then I want you to commit, before you hear from me again about this topic, because I don't know if I'm going to do a third straight episode on it. We might break it up a little more. But before we do, the third part of getting discovered is, what would I be able to do? What type of podcast could I do that isn't yet another writer talking about writing? And then let's check in. Send me an email. Send me a message. Let me know. Go over to paulsading.com, click on the contact tab. Send me an email of what you've come up with. I'd love to hear from you. I'd also love for you to leave a rating and review of the show on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcatcher. And those really help the show be found. Also, if you'd like to support the show, you can always, of course, go over to patreon.com/Paul Sading. Not only do you get this, but you get a ton of fiction, early, exclusive, and some stories that the rest of the world doesn't get to hear, depending on your patron level. And it helps me continue to do this. And if you just want to say thanks, even $1 a day, right? You still can't even buy a cup of coffee with it. But if enough of you were to support at that level, I could do other great things to help you all out. Maybe start making some tutorials to help those of you who are looking forward to this. So anyways, do those things if you would like to help out. If you're enjoying the show, I would appreciate a rating and review. It would help out immensely. So next episode, we're going to do a topic, theme that I don't identify with myself. And it's going to be very interesting. Eric Saris from Marsfall, which is a sci-fi audio drama, one of the Fate Crafter Network shows, is going to come on and talk about procrastination. And I learned a lot because that's not me. That's not my personality style. I go, and get things done. So it's going to be, there's some really good tips, tools, and tactics in there. So thanks for listening again. And I hope everyone's having a wonderful summer. Until next episode, keep being epic.
This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sading, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse @WritingHorrible and over at paulsading.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.